Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the video. So listen, creating hip depth in your backswing is critical to avoiding early extension in your golf swing. Now, in order to create that hip depth, you have to be able to rotate into your trail hip while keeping your pelvis from moving forward towards the ball, which is going to limit your ability to get your arms and your hands down for contact. Now, your inability to rotate into your hip is going to cause compensations in other joints, which is going to decrease your performance and increase your likelihood of injury. So I'm going to show you 3 golf hip rotation exercises today that you've probably never seen that are going to help you create that depth in your backswing and avoid early extension in your golf swing. Chad Elon here with ULaunch Performance. Listen, this channel's all about improving your golf fitness, your stability, your mobility, your strength, your speed, your power, to optimize your performance on the golf course. So if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and click the bell so that you'll be notified every Monday when there's a new video. Listen, if you like this video, if it's helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends and family. All right, so these 3 golf hip rotation exercises aren't just about creating more range of motion. It's about teaching your brain how to control and stabilize through a full range of motion so that it becomes more ingrained, so that you can actually use it when it matters in your golf swing. Also, I don't want you to think necessarily about these as rotation exercises. I want you to think about more of like a pushing-pulling action, all right? Like we're going to pull or push our leg back into our hip to create that depth, all right? Now, I'm an average golfer just like you guys. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube, and I was watching the Malaska video, and he was talking about the idea that calling it a hip turn does us more harm than good. And at first I was like, all right. But he was talking about the pushing-pulling action of pulling that hip back into the socket to create that rotation.
So we're going to talk about your hips and how they work. So what this club is this is my pelvis. So this is my right hip socket, and this is my left hip socket. This is the middle of my pelvis. Now, here's the task. The task is, as my hips rotate, the center of my pelvis can't move closer to the ball. If I move closer to the ball, you're in trouble. You're jammed, you're steep, you have all kinds of problems. So here's what happened with a lot of people. Because they tended to sway away from the ball, which is another issue in and of itself, but here's what everybody said. Okay, I want you to keep your right knee flexed, stabilize your right hip. So let's see what happens if you do that. So if this is my right hip socket right here, and I stabilize it so it's not going to move, and I turn my pelvis or hips at all, what just happened to my center? It just moved 4, 5, 6 inches closer to the ball. So if I stabilize this and I turn my hips, and then I try to get off my right side and clear my hips, what's your center keep doing? You keep moving closer and closer to the ball. Here's your task. Now, at the very least, whatever amount your left hip is going to go this way, your right hip has to move back, your hip socket. So if you did this, some of the tour players do that. And then they go here, and then they move to their left side, and then they push their left hip out of the way. So what did this do? It's moving further away from the ball. Now here's where most of the tour players hang out. When they go back, this left hip socket doesn't move out. It moves a little lateral, and their right hip moves back. So they do this. So what's this done? Further away, and then they move this back. What did they just do? That's why you see all this room for their arms. That's why they can shallow the club or shallow their arms. There's space. If you're sitting there stabilizing this hip, right now, game over, abort mission, we're done. You're going to be steep and over it. So you got to start to understand that once you set up, when I start back, this hip socket has to get moved back. It has to move back. If it stays there and my hips turn at all, now I'm in trouble.
There was also a Tiger Woods interview a few months back where he was talking about creating hip depth in his backswing.
We were talking yesterday after your round about how you've made a couple of swing changes just to get that pressure off of your back.
Trying to get this hip deeper, and then from there, keep the left hip deep as well, which puts the club more out in front of me, instead of a lot of time when I'm feeling tight, I don't quite get deep enough loaded on my right hip, and I start standing up, which puts a lot of stress on my back. But if I don't feel like I can turn, I can't get back into my hip.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it all depends on how I've been training, how I feel, how I work, pre-round and trying to get everything switched on.
All right, so let's get started on the exercises. All right, so first exercise is the sideline hip hinge. All right, and we can also call this the open and close door exercise. So obviously we're going to be laying on our side. So I'm going to use a foam roll. You could use a set of towels. You can use, you know what? I'm going to use a yoga block. You can use a foam roll or a set of towels to support your head. And we're going to make sure that our hips are aligned 90 degrees at the knee, 90 degrees at the shoulder, 90 degrees at the elbow. All right. From this position, what I want you to do is I want you to raise your ribs up, which is going to bring your shoulder blade down and get your shoulders stacked. Then I want you to, excuse me, bring your ribs down and tuck your pelvis or bring your belt buckle up. And this is the position that we're going to work out of. All right. Now for right-handed golfers, we're focusing on this bottom leg, this bottom hip, and creating rotation through that. All right. Now we're also creating rotation through this shoulder, which is doing the open and closed door hinge. So from here, we're going to open up by bringing that top leg back. And this is actually creating external rotation in our bottom hip. But then we're going to close the door and we're going to work all the way around, and we want to push that leg back into that hip. Create that internal rotation. Back to open. And then close. Again, pulling that leg back into that hip. Now, if that's a little uncomfortable, you can also bring this leg out to the straight down and perform the same way. Again, this kind of gives you a better idea of that bottom hip that we're focusing on and really rotating all the way into that hip. So, now for all these exercises, I want you to perform them on both sides. Even though this is about your backswing and about the trail hip, perform it on the other side, because actually in your backswing you got hip internal rotation to external rotation and hip internal rotation to the front leg and external rotation on the backswing. So they both have to internally and externally rotate. So for all three exercises, make sure you perform them on both sides. This also you can work out of a progression where you work more into a plank position here, just adds a little bit more of a difficulty to it, or even from a standing position. This is another good one where we're just focusing on rotating into this hip and rotating out of it, opening the door, closing the door. With this one, you want to make sure that that knee stays in place, it doesn't come out, you don't pop that hip out, and you stay right in this straight line here and focus on that hip, focus on bringing this leg up into that hip. All right, so the second exercise is a hip internal rotation hinge. All right, so it's going to look just like a standard single leg hinge. And a single leg hinge looks like this. Start with your leg here. This one's just kind of giving you the stability. There's really no weight on this leg. And all we're going to do is, again, we got a slight bend in the knee, and we're just going to hinge at the waist. And again, focusing on drawing that leg back into that hip. Okay? So that's just a standard single leg hinge right there. But now what we want to do is we want to add an internal rotation component to it, because that's what we're doing in our backswing, is we're drawing that hip back and we're rotating, internally rotating into that hip. So it's going to look a little bit like this. Again, slight bend, hinge at the waist, and as we're hinging, we're rotating into that hip. And again, I feel a real deep glute stretch right there. I'm getting that femur, that leg back into that hip. Again, hinge, rotation. And then we're squeezing that glute to come up. Back down, hinge, and rotate in. All right, I'll show it to you from the side, give you a better look here. Again, all the weight on the right leg, slight bend in the knee, hinge at the waist, and rotate into that hip. And back up, okay? We want to be careful with this one is we don't want it to look like this, where this hip comes out, where that knee comes out, right? We want to stay over this leg, over this foot, straight back hinge, and internally rotate. Now, you can perform this with a dumbbell, you can perform this with a band or a cable. If you're at the gym, same thing. You just kind of want that cable coming out from the angle here or from the side, and it's just going to kind of pull you into that internal rotation and then come out of it. And same thing with a dumbbell or a kettlebell that you're holding in your hand. Same thing, you're just going to kind of look to drop it right outside of your foot there. And back up. All right, the third exercise is the lawnmower exercise. And I'm going to show it to you with some bands, but it can easily be performed in a gym with some cables. They've got the arms that come out to the side. You set those down to the ground. You get 2 cables from the side. So all you do is just cross the cables, and we're going to set up in our golf posture. So our hips right over our ankles, slight bend forward. And all we're going to do here is, again, we're just going to rotate. We're going to pull that hip back into that socket and then switch, and we're coming back and pulling back into that socket. So it's a push-pull. Right? Obviously this video is all about the backswing, but again, internal rotation on the backswing, we're getting internal rotation on the downswing in the front leg. Right, so real easy exercises to do if you got bands or if you're in the gym with some cables. If by chance you're at home, you only got one band, you can still easily perform this same way, just focus on doing one side at a time. Really pulling that hip back and back out. All right, so there you have it. Listen, you've got 3 exercises that can make a huge impact on your backswing and your golf swing overall. So give those a try and work at them. It takes consistency. Also, I'm always talking about assessing yourself, right? So if you haven't checked out the hip mobility test for golfers, give that a shot. It's going to let you know where you are as far as your internal and external rotation of your hips. It's a simple, easy test that you can do. And as always, if you got any questions or comments, leave them in the description below. I will get back to you. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. And I'll see you back here next Monday for a new golf fitness video.